No, you
And
sound fine to me. I haven't heard Jono talk yet, but
I've muted him. He can't talk.
good. Good.
Nick's got me on mute.
Yeah. Cool. What's been happening?
You answer first, Jono.
Oh,
You've been too silent.
no, but the problem is me and Chris have been talking outside of here anyway, so we already know what we
Yeah.
Just a whole bunch of little things. There's not a whole lot going on. So I'm just trying to start up that new business that I've told both you guys about. So there's a lot of little things to do with that. Little boring things that are annoying.
Yeah.
So there's stuff keeping me busy for sure. But with music stuff, like in terms of production stuff or recording, can't get anyone in. So there's not a lot there.
Yeah.
I'm
reverting to the most stupid things at the moment. It's like
yeah,
supposed to have a band in to record a single and have it done by November, and that's not looking good. So it's like, send me your DIs, let's program some drums, and then it's like a week's gone by and I've done like half the amount of work that I do in 3 days normally, because everything's just so much slower and there's so much more like massaging things into places that they shouldn't really be massaged, because you're trying to get them to feel like they weren't recorded in lockdown. Just
So you're really dependent on their, I guess, motivation and their gear, right? Or are there other variables as well?
Well, it's like the things that you would normally do in like 2 seconds to go, hey, can you play that differently? Or can we get a new take of that? It's like drums, for instance. It's like, oh, I really want this to feel this certain way. And you like tell them to play it a certain way. And then you're just like, oh, well, I can't do that. So now I have to program it the way I want. And then it never really comes out the right way. And then, yeah, this particular project's like a single, which is going into an EP, which will happen next year. So it's also to like trying to match what's going to happen. And I don't know what that is yet. It's not even the other way around. It's not even like I have like live drums to try and match or anything like that. It's like try and predict the future. I can't do that.
Yeah.
Like communication's like that variable where it's like being able to sit across from someone and be like, that's shit. If you did it would feel good. And it's like when you have to have when you do that over Zoom, it's kind of like, oh shit, how do I explain this in a way that they're going to understand? And half the time you just can't, and you just end up with a client that's more confused than when you began speaking. You just think, oh, I should have just said nothing. Like I should have just left it.
It's like the logo
to live by.
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. Yeah.
But like, then I wonder, I mean, I know not everyone's a session drummer, but how do session drummers handle this sort of thing? Because they would probably be sent a song and told, come up with the drums or play these drums, right? Is that typically what would happen? Have you guys ever dealt with a session drummer?
Chris has been the session drummer.
A couple of times. I mean, I think that those people are, I mean, I would imagine that it would be a lot more painful than what people probably make it out to be. I mean, this kind of like idea that you would be sending over a song, send over some Midi, and you send it to the amazing session drummer and they come back and it's all perfect. I'm sure it's not like that. I'm sure there's all those communication issues along the way as well. For me though, like I haven't had to deal with that too much, because a big part of my bread and butter is just recording live drums. So I'm usually, if someone doesn't have live drums or they're kind of doing session work or something like that, I'm probably not involved, because most of the stuff that I do is people who have have a drummer or a live drummer ready to go and they want to come and record it with me here. So I don't really see a lot of that. I guess unfortunately, like it'd be cool to have someone else take care of that stuff somewhere else and it's just all recorded and played perfectly and then sort it out. But Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess those, as I said, those communication issues and those teething things would probably be a thing. Um, maybe just a little bit more refined, considering that they do it all the time. I don't know.
Yeah, it'd probably, yeah, like you said, be more refined, efficient, and I guess they would have their own system as well.
I also too think that like with the way that program drums work these days and how close that you can get them and how good that they sound, I think much of a thing. So I think that if you were working with a session musician playing live drums in their own, whether it be their own studio or someone else's studio, they're probably going to be a little bit more expensive, a little bit more pro, and they're probably going to have that stuff refined a little bit more. Because if you weren't working with that, you'd probably just end up going with MIDI drums because they move the needle further and faster than
Yeah.
someone who maybe isn't so experienced in that, I guess. It sounds a bit cynical, doesn't it?
What's notice all these drummers who look like they're not incredible, right? They're sort of average players thinking, I'm going to be this session drummer. And I'm thinking, how are you going to beat, I mean, like, how are you going to beat Easy Drummer or G? Like, I'd rather work with that. Like, you don't offer anything more, you offer less. And I don't know what some of these guys are thinking, like it's a lot of like younger guys, say like early 20s, just thinking, I don't really know what that is, but I'm gonna start doing it. And
I don't even think it's like a session drummer thing though. Like for me, a lot of I mean, if I'm really invested in a project, for me, it's like the standard, the bar starts at program drums. So for us to do live drums and for us to do, to kind of jump down that, live drums are expensive to do and they take a lot of time. They're difficult, they're hard to record. I mean, the results are usually really good, but you have to be better than the programming. If you're not better than the programming, then the program is going to be better than you. So why do spend the money and the time? I mean, you look at a 5-track EP that you might do with someone, like half the budget, half the time is going to be spent on drums, drum editing, pulling sounds, setup, all of that stuff. It's incredibly laborsome. So yeah, I don't even think it's a session drummer thing. I think you start at the point of like, are you better than Easy Drummer? Are you better than Superior Drummer? Get Good Drums, whatever it is you're working with. If you're not better than that, it's going. I mean, it's not to say that you can't do it, but it's not going to be as effective.
Yeah,
I'm putting it simply,
This
it's
is
kind of negated like the point of having entry level session drumming, I guess.
this isn't being cynical or anything, but how do you become better than MIDI? Like, what do you say are the elements that make it worthwhile to record a live drummer?
Jono, you take this one because I think you've worked with more MIDI than I
have. What makes you better than the MIDI drums? I think, look, it's a tough one because there's a few different ways of looking at it. Like in terms of how you hit the drum, how you make a kit sound. There's that. But then there's also like the element of like, and I think this is the one draw card that a good drummer has, that, you can get all the MIDI packs in the world with different fills. But the thing is, if you have a good drummer that's tasty, that's listened to all this music and can pull out all these sorts of different things, when you're tracking and all of a sudden you think, oh, this transition's not working. Usually a drum fill can fix almost any transition. You don't actually have to rewrite anything. If you use a fill, you can kind of get anywhere you want. If you've got a guy that can just whip out something great and be consistent, well, then that's something that's better and it's more exciting. But in terms of like sonically speaking, it's like, it's really hard because now, like I used to not like the idea of program drums. But it's that like Chris was saying, it's so close. It's like that side. It's either or either. I wouldn't know how do you get better than that. It's like, well, you can't be more in time. Like you can hit the drum better and make the kit sound better. You can make it sound more real, more organic. But I think the one thing that you don't get with MIDI is like, you don't get a drummer, you've got MIDI and your own head. Like you don't actually have a drummer. You've got MIDI and whatever you know about drums. And if you don't know much about drums, you're going to download a MIDI pack, but you still don't know anything about drums. Like,
yeah.
So, I mean, especially for a guitarist, you see it all the time, like the guitarist that writes in the modern metal band, and a lot of them do know about drums now. They do sort of understand how they work. You can't have 4 hands hitting things at the same time. But you didn't a long time ago. It was like all these guys, they just had no idea like about how it would feel to play a certain groove. And they write this shit. And I was always like, what is this? This is horrible. You're not a drummer. You've got the MIDI drums, you've got the MIDI pack from Thomas Hark or whatever, like, and it's crazy. There's all these fills, and it's like, but you don't know how to use them. He knows how to use them, but you don't.
I think also too the with program drums, they offer a level of consistency that I think most drummers probably overlook more than anything. To me, it's the last thing that gets addressed when someone's learning their parts to go into the studio. So program drums always have that benefit of just being super consistent. If you set everything the same velocity, which is a bad idea, but if you were to set everything at the same velocity, the MIDI drums will play that. If you told a drummer to play everything the same velocity, chances are they're not going to. Mm-hmm. So I think MIDI drums always has the consistency that most producers are always looking for. Okay. So it's always going to have that nailed. I think that if you do want to be better than the program drums and you don't want that to put you out of a job, you got to start with that. Mm-hmm. The thing that the program drums are harder to get right with, I think, and it comes down to the programming, is the feel. Now, it's not necessarily about like quantizing or not quantizing or putting things on the grid or off the grid. It's simply dynamics. And you can program those dynamics in, but it takes so long. So for me, it's like I could spend 2 or 3 days programming every velocity for every single hit in a song, and it could probably get really close. I've done it before, and it's like convincing, really convincing. I get a drummer in who knows their stuff, and it's probably going to take an hour. So on the flip side of that, like, it is quicker and easier to have a great drummer do something than trying to program those details in. So I think that if your efficiency is better than program drums, there's one leg up you have. If you've got the consistency down, I think that's a thing. And, if you just offer something which is a little bit more human in terms of like the infinite variables that happen in between what's been sampled in whoever has built the plugin or whatever you're using. If you're able to offer those kinds of like, I guess non-linearities, then yeah, that's where your value lies as a drummer.
Okay. Ty, like what you just said made me think of when you were doing the drum library with Nick. What was the process? So would you record like a sound for every velocity?
Yeah, it's a sound and multiple. You want to try and get as many velocities as possible, but also no 2 hits ever sound the same. So it's about getting what we call round robins, enough of them to make it feel like if you've got 8 kick drum hits straight after each other, you're not hearing the same sound over and over again. So if you're trying to get usually 8 to 10 round robins, and then as many velocities as you can get in between that, so everything from the softest hit to the hardest hit possible.
Okay.
And I find that like the program drums and the libraries which have done that better have more velocities into it, and it's really difficult to get, especially when it comes to cymbals. Like, you think of all the different sounds you can get out of a hi-hat, and it's like a hard hit. It's not more than just a hard hit or a soft hit. It's a hard hit or a soft hit, but a hard hit with the hi-hat's a little open, really open, not open at all. The tip, like it's, we started working on a cymbal one. I'm not sure whether it will come out or not, but we spent 2 days just on the hi-hat alone. That's just hitting hi-hats. And we didn't even go into that much detail with our velocities, really. Like, there's guys doing 10 or 15 levels of velocities. So that's everything they're doing it 10, 15 times, across 6 to 8 to 10 hits. It's grueling.
If I had a time machine, I'd get someone from about 100 years ago, and I'd transport them to the room while you were working on that hi-hat, just so they could see and go, "What the fuck's going on here?" The hi-hat, like.
Yeah. I mean, it's like when it's done properly, it's really rewarding, and it does sound really cool. And I think, I'm not one for option paralysis, but the more drum libraries that come out, the better, because I feel like, back in, what probably started about 10 years ago, when program drums really started becoming quite popular, stroke, all of that started becoming a little bit too popular in a way. Like, you heard it, you could hear it really easily. I think now there's more and more libraries coming out. They're all kind of starting to thin out a little bit across everything that's using the program drums as well. So yeah, I mean, I sound like it's a really hard process, which it is, but like, I welcome more and more of it as much as possible, because I think the variety is a really good thing for producers and musicians.
Would you say the whole process of being literally under the microphone between you and Nick, how, like, sort of being so analytical of your hits and then coming up with all the different sounds, has that complemented like your actual drumming as well? Didn't have these issues last time.
Oh, what are you doing inside? Look how beautiful it is out there.
Yeah, I don't want to get sunburnt.
Ah.
Actually, I could sit outside. Maybe I will. Let's see how the connection is.
I want to go outside now.
Yeah.
Looks great out there.
So, yeah, my question was, after going through that very analytical process of recording all the different drum hits and all that stuff, has it benefited your actual playing or Nick's recording performance as well?
Well, with Nick, I mean, it was one thing which really strengthened our studio relationship. We did, if I look back at the first few recordings that we had done together, and then had done the samples together, and then the most recent recordings that we've done, there's a lot more kind of, I guess, unsaid dialogue that happens. We just get in, we get stuff done, and we can smash out. I mean, the last album, we ended up smashing that out in the better part of 3 days, really. Maybe a little bit longer, but that's pretty unheard of. And a lot of that comes down to that communication, which Jono was talking about before over Zoom. I mean, we're taking that one step further. Like, we know already what needs to happen because we've been through the recording process so much, and doing samples is like intense recording. Like, that's, as you said, it's super analytical. You're looking at everything in the smallest details possible. So having a musician that you're working with, like, the musician producer relationship is usually fairly not opposing, but like, the concerns and the objectives are a little different on each side of the fence there. I find that that process kind of made me understand more about him as a player and what he's looking for when we're recording. And he's also got a new a new understanding of how the engineering and the producing side works. So there's lots of stuff which I'm not explaining to him anymore, and he's not explaining to me anymore. It just kind of happens.
Yeah.
So it's like, I guess I gained a fair bit of synergy from doing that. But the thing is, that's a relationship that is unique to every person that walks in the door here. It's not the same for everyone. And so I'd have to do a lot of sample packs to be able to gain that from everybody, I guess.
Are you going to do a sample pack, Jono?
Look, I don't think I would have the focus. I think I'd start, and a couple of hours later, I'd think I got to do something else.
Is it lunchtime yet?
Lunchtime.
Yeah.
No, it's yeah. There's probably no way in hell you'd ever catch me doing a sample pack. I wouldn't know where to begin. But I'd just use whatever Chris makes, and why would I? I was like, he can do that, and I'll use it when it's done. I think that's a better idea for me.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's yeah. Hey, look, someone's got to do it, and it ain't going to be me.
Yeah, I don't know if I have the I don't know if it's something that many people can do more than once. I really, after that process, I really take my hat off to the guys, doing things like the Tune Track guys doing Superior Drummer, or the Get Good, drums guys, which are, putting out sample pack after sample pack, like every couple of months there's a new one. And I just think of the process of how many times they've had to do that. And it's a wild one, that one for sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I used to think like, I would be like, what, Superior Drummer 3 came out, was it maybe 5 years ago or something? Maybe a little more recent than that. But I was like, how are they only up to Superior Drummer 3? They did Superior Drummer 2 like 10 years ago. And then thinking about like what goes into it and the detail that those guys do, like they're talking like 300 gigabytes of samples or something like that. You need a whole nother hard drive just to use that stuff. And it's like the amount of audio captured and the amount of detail that they've done it, and the amount of drum kits that they've done as well. It's no wonder it takes them 10 years to do, a new version.
Yeah.
It's funny, like what the user's perspective would be, especially if they get frustrated with the software for whatever reason. Like, and they don't realize how much work has gone behind the scenes to make the software work and have the all the different velocities and the sounds.
And also too, like, especially with Superior Drummer, like the level of detail that they've gone into with like multi-microphone, like, because you think about how drum sampling works. It's like it's playing back just a sample that someone else has created. But you look into the detail, they'll do things like they'll have bleed of things. So like you'll hear the sound of what a snare drum sounds like through a tom mic playing through the tom mic. Like, and you think about that, it's like you think about, I guess, what coming back to what you said about what the user's perspective is on it. It's like thinking, okay, well, snare drum, well, put the microphone on the snare drum, hit it. How hard can it be? Well, there's so much more to a drum sound than what's coming off the snare drum microphone. It's the room mics, it's the overheads. It's, as I said, it's like the bleed of what's happening in the tom mics, and all of those little tiny details, they become quite accumulative, and they turn into those details. Sure, it doesn't seem like a big detail about what's happening on a floor tom mic when the snare drums hit. It doesn't make sense, but when you add all those details up over time, that starts to become, the full picture of what a real drum sound is. So, and every one of those hits, every one of those like samples created, and the corresponding room mic or bleed mic or whatever it is, all that needs to be cataloged, named, programmed. It's such a huge job. Yeah, I don't want to do it again.
You'd have to be mad to do that.
Yeah. And you think about like the budget and the amount of time that's needed to do that. These guys are doing this in like some of the nicest recording studios in the world. They have to have engineers and personnel and all these, like it's those some of those programs get up to $500 or $600 to buy, and I think people get a bit funny about the price with it, but that's like the price of what it is to record in it's like half the price of what it is to record in one of those studios for a day, and that's what it is to set up as well. So you just I mean all those things start to give you an idea of how big the project is to make that stuff. Yeah.
Has the Nick Pettersen library become whatchamacallit? Because remember how you were telling me you had to use the full version of Contact or whatever?
Yeah.
Can I use the demo version yet?
Unfortunately not. The process there is quite difficult because it's Native Instruments. It's quite confusing how it works, but Native Instruments require you to license your library with them, and then as a manufacturer, you have to purchase licenses to resell. And then there's things like upload fees and things like that. It's quite expensive to do. But the big stinger is that every time you want to make a revision to the software, or the library, sorry, you have to. It comes at a new re-upload fee, which I think is about €2,000, which is quite expensive. So the anxiety that surrounds that is that you have to make sure that the product is absolutely perfect. Otherwise, you can get can be a pretty expensive bill to be continuously re-uploading into their library and their reprogramming fees and whatever it is that they need to do. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't think it's like uncalled for, because what they're providing is pretty it's a pretty good platform for creators to be able to use, but it just gets quite expensive. So we have to make sure that the product is absolutely perfect. We don't want to put stuff out which has got lots of bugs. And then the other thing too is that neither Nick or I are programmers, so we have to use someone else he's a guy in Sweden which does a lot of programming, and he's busy doing his own things and stuff like that. So aligning that schedule, it's difficult.
Yeah.
So one day we'll see.
I'll just get it probably makes sense for me to just buy the full version of Contact or whatever. And
I think it's on sale at the moment. So
perfect.
Yeah.
Well, you could do a guitar library, Jono. Full of licks and
it's happening. It's happening.
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
I almost think that would be worse in some ways than doing the drum one. I think I'd rather do a drum library, to be honest. Yeah, like there's in some ways it would be so much easier, but in a few other ways there's a few like there's a different set of problems. I wouldn't.
The level of articulations that you need to get of different ways that you can play guitar are infinitely more there's infinite more variables about a way you can play guitar than you can hit a drum. I guess you don't have to worry about the multi-miking thing, which gets quite complex.
Yeah, that's something you wouldn't have to do.
Yeah, I mean, you have basically one output on a guitar, and that's
so that bit would be sweet. Like, it's like but no, I've heard like there's like gin bass. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
And there's like the tune tracks doing it, and I've heard the guitar stuff, and it's starting to actually sound like a guitar.
Yeah. It doesn't sound like a trumpet out of Guitar Pro anymore.
We always used to hear those Guitar Pro things, and I was like, it sounds like a trumpet.
Yeah.
It's a guitar. But yeah, no. But I reckon, yeah, it's gonna be just like drums. I think in a couple of years' time, it will sound really good. Then now we'll see like a lot of people. Same thing with what Chris was saying is like, if you're not really good, if you're not as good as the program guitar, well, there's really no place for you in the studio.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing here? So yeah, the digital things upon us, and like there's pros and cons like anything.
It's not really that new, really, if you think about it. Like, what, the world's most famous bass line, the Seinfeld intro, was played on a Casio keyboard. It wasn't even a real bass, and everyone, what's that thing? It's like everyone pulls out a bass, and it's like, oh, cool, play Seinfeld. It wasn't even a real bass to begin with. So if they were doing that in it's late 80s, early 90s,
Yeah,
I'm sure we could get away with it now.
that wasn't that long ago. 90s.
Yeah.
Seems like yesterday.
Oh,
Yeah,
I've
that's
got
a funny one.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just I'm getting phone calls. I'm not going to take them.
Just put them on. Put them onto the podcast. See who it is.
Hey, look, if it was Davino interrupting, I reckon that'd be funny, but it's just people.
Yeah, stuff them. 2 questions. I don't know if you can reveal too much, but what is it that you're working on, Jono?
What am I working on?
Yeah, like the guitar thing.
Well, guitar thing.
Yeah.
What guitar thing am I working on?
Must have misunderstood. I thought you were working on like a guitar library.
Oh, no. I would never do that.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah, anyone who goes ahead and does that, good luck to them. I wish them all the best. And I'm just glad I'm not doing it. No, I would never.
Okay. All right. And the other question I had was then, in summary, what are the best attributes of a recording drummer?
Well, the first thing is going to be definitely that consistency we were talking about before. Consistency and stroke. Actually, no, I'll take that back. The first and most important thing is just knowing the parts, knowing the stuff, because Jono's heard me talk about this a billion times, but the way I think about knowing your parts is that the studio gets pretty demanding. So you want to be able to be flexible and malleable enough to be able to change parts on the fly and change I guess perform in certain ways or kind of just do whatever's kind of, I don't want to say expected of you, but whatever kind of arises in the session. Now, if you only have a finite amount of energy to spend on something, you don't want that to be spent on remembering parts, because you can do that at home.
Yeah.
You want to be able to have all the energy and like all the memory and all the brain power to be able to attack whatever's the really important thing, which is performing. And being able to work on the fly. So I think the preparation, it just sounds like such an obvious thing, but it's something which is really overlooked. So the preparation of just knowing the parts, so they're just second nature. So you don't have to think about them again. Yeah. So then when it's like, hey man, you need to change that fill, it's like, okay, cool. I've got so much more headspace to be able to attack that fill. Yeah. I'm not worrying about trying to remember the part which I only learned 5 minutes ago before it into that fill. And then your energy can be dedicated to making sure your stroke sounds really good, making sure the drum sounds really good. Both the engineer or the producer can stop worrying about if you're playing the part correctly or not, because they can have some faith that you're already doing that, and worry if the drum's still in tune, or worry if there's no dud mic cable or something else that's happening, which has got to divide their attention as well. So I think that's the number one thing.
That definitely takes the load off, especially an inexperienced drummer. If they at least know their parts, it's really difficult when the first thing you're communicating is what part you're about to record. So you're saying, hey, you've got like 2 bars before the second chorus. They're already thinking, okay, I'm just letting that sink in. And then you're like, okay, and remember with that fill, like do this. And then when you do the chorus, remember to be consistent, because you're not hitting hard enough all of a sudden because you can't land properly. And then at the end of it, they're just singing, I can't remember the first thing. And half the time it's like, because you never wrote a fill, you're just playing whatever, and it's different every time, and it can't be. And like, unless you're really good, but having that just knowing the songs if you're inexperienced.
I think like an analogy that I think of a lot when it comes to that stuff, it's like imagine you're driving to a place where you don't really know where you're going. Like you might have a map in front of you, or you might be taking directions from somebody.
Yeah.
That would probably be the worst time to remember how to drive a car. Trying to learn how to drive the car at the same time, you might be like, oh, I'm just learning how to drive manual, and I'm also trying to figure out where I'm going. It's like you want that to be second nature, so you can think of exactly where you're going. You can think of exactly about reading the map or following the GPS or listening to whoever's giving you directions. The last thing you want to be thinking about, okay, all right, I got to pull my clutch out at this time because I'm changing gear. It's like, it's all about being able to dedicate the right amount of focus to what's actually happening in front of you.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's very accurate, I think. I think, like, I agree with all of that. And I think probably the most valuable thing, it's really funny, right? I think the most valuable thing is actually experience, which is kind of ironic when you think about it, because I could start at the beginning and say like, okay, it's good to like, first of all, practice and learn to fucking play drums. So work on your chops, get your skill level up, get some variety, get some creativity going. Then your consistency in dynamics as well as the part you're playing and understanding that. And then, yeah, obviously knowing the parts, having a nice sounding stroke, all that stuff. And then you take it there, and all of that stuff is really experience. And it's like the best thing I think is like, with the dynamic between Chris and Nick, like they don't have to talk about a whole bunch of things that they used to because of experience. And so you can't start there and just tell someone be experienced. But I think that's the thing, is go get the experience, do whatever you got to do to get some experience, because you can read about it till the cows come home. You still rock up and you'll suck. You can't kill it the first time. So, get in and do it, and then do it again and do it again. And you'll start to be a better communicator. You'll realize how, I just reckon like the best musicians know how bad they are. Like they can hear, oh, I didn't hit that right. They don't need to be told. Like they've already heard it. They're like, yeah, sorry, I've got to go again. That was fun.
I think one of the best things that has come into the drumming world particular is those Yamaha EAD systems. Because I don't know if you've seen them, Jono. Nick, I know you've got one, but they're a really small. It's like it's the size of a trigger. Just sits on top of your bass drum, runs into a little module. It gives you a set of stereo mics and a kick trigger built into it. It's got some rough sounds and a bit of compression, some effects built in, and then it sends it straight out to your phone, I think it is, or can record to a computer, whatever it is. And the amount of drummers which are taking that system on, and for $500 or something, I think they're not too expensive. They have a full way to actually record themselves, because you can't listen to what you're doing while you're playing. Really, like you can kind of get a vibe for it, but the best way to get that feedback loop and get that idea of what's learning about how much you actually suck is to listen back. And you can't do that if you're not recording. So some form of recording, video, particularly the unforgiving ways, which is like phone recordings and stuff like that. If you can make that stuff sound good, it means you're ready for a studio which is going to make you sound really good.
Yeah.
I've never heard of those things. I'm just looking at them now, and it's true. Like when you hear yourself back, even if you're quite a skilled player, you'll sort of think, yep, I'm pretty good. And then when you hear it back, you kind of go, oh, that's pretty messy. Like
all the time.
It's like it's real messy. And that's a good thing if you can hear that it's messy. It's a real worry. I think one of the moments that I was speechless was doing a session with this band, and I remember the drummer he was everything you shouldn't be. He was inconsistent. He didn't know the parts. His stroke was, I don't know what it was. And I was just like, I remember bringing him in, and I was like, sit here, like, listen to this. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, just listen to this. Tell me, does this sound good? And he goes, I think it sounds mad. And I was like, what do I say? What do I do now? Like, he's meant to go, yeah, that's shocking, dude. But he was like, I think it sounds so cool. I was like, it's horrible. Like, there's nothing good about this. It wasn't one redeeming feature. I was like, oh.
Well, I suppose that's important too. Is I mean, it's important to be able to hear how you're playing, but it's also too more important to know what's good as well, because that's another thing too. You know, like I think often drummers seem to be a little bit more guilty of this, but they'll listen to a song or listen to their performance, and they focus on something which they like, but it's not necessarily, it doesn't really hold that much value into the whole arrangement of the song. They might really like the sound of a snare drum, and that's really cool, but maybe it's not working, or maybe it's not sounding right for the song, and maybe it's not actually that good. You know, it's good for a particular objective that they have in their head about what's you know, as I said, like a nice snare drum sound. That doesn't really do much for a song, especially if the song's not calling for that snare drum sound. So like learning to hear what's valuable. I think that's a better word, not what's good and what's not, but what's actually valuable to what you're working on.
Yeah.
Which I think you need a whole nother podcast for that one, but what that actually is. But yeah.
Yeah, adding value to the project, like a really standard idea, but it's like, yeah, that's everything.
I mean, you guys both just briefly touched on, I'll use the label difficult musicians who can't hear, you know, that they're not hitting the right note vocally or playing something unsuitable on drums. Like, how do you guys manage that?
We both witnessed each other manage that many times.
Do chairs go flying out the window?
Almost.
Or people?
It was almost one.
I think we're definitely tapping into the stereotype of grumpy, angry
producer,
sound guys or producers or whatever it is. I think that like something I've come to like, I'm not sure if these are just like lockdown epiphanies or not, but like something I've come to appreciate a little more recently is that everybody has a learning curve ahead of them when it comes to studio. And I think one thing that, I mean, Nikki tapped into difficult musicians. I think it's important that producers can be a little more empathetic to the idea that, hey, we might have been sitting here doing this for 10 years or something like that, and it's back to that experiencing that Jono was saying. Like, we might have all the experience in the world to know what the worst performance is, the best performance is, and what's valuable, what's not valuable. But you don't know what you don't know, right? And some people, like, you have to be forgiving to you know, to allow people to learn these things themselves. And sometimes it's not all that much of a negative thing. You know, sometimes I hear a performance which isn't that great, or something that needs kind of a bit more communication, or less of like the unsaid dialogue I was talking about before, like something that you need to actually explain to someone. And it's a really good refresh for me to actually articulate what it is I want to hear, what it is that is valuable, what it is that's going to make the performance really good. And sitting down and actually defining that's a really important thing, which I feel like most people, I feel, is the first thing that gets forgotten about when we're talking about this kind of thing. So look, it's not all doom and gloom. How to handle it, I think that it's a two-way street though. While it's important for a producer to be you know, tolerant and patient, and also to open-minded, it's also too really important that the performer can be open-minded as well. Because I'm going to say more often than not, the performer or the musician is going to have more to learn, has an opportunity to learn more than the other way around. As that sounds a little arrogant, but you know, like, the studio shouldn't be seen as a place of like intimidation, or a place where that people need to feel pressure or anxiety. You should kind of see it as a place where they can, you know, get a few more points of experience or learn a few more things. Like, sometimes the best sessions for musicians aren't the ones that they come out getting the best product that they wanted. It's the one that they've learnt more than what they did going into the studio.
Yeah.
So there's nothing that I can do to get somebody to learn what I've learnt in 10 years in the space of a day, 3 days, a week, 2 weeks, however long it is where we're working on something. It's just not possible.
Yeah.
But it is possible that you know that the next project that we were able to do would be a little bit easier, would be a little bit you know, be in a bit more flow state for how we work together and stuff. It's just an experiencing and a learning thing.
I think coming in with the right attitude is key, but I mean, like you said,
Absolutely.
from the producer side, it's like, you know, be a little bit more empathetic, blah, blah, blah. But the musician, well, at least my view and the benefit that I see in recording in the studio is being under the microscope and like having the producer tell you that the way you hit the drum is your double kicks sound wobbly, like all that sort
Hopefully
of
with
stuff.
better dialogue than that.
Well, yeah, I guess if you're close with the producer or whatever, then it's fine to just, you know, other because there's that rapport and whatever. But yeah, like if people come into the studio who are recording knowing that this is a good opportunity for me to learn and hone my craft from someone who I'm paying, like I feel that's basically to me the best way to come into it.
You would think that because it makes sense logically. But you know, when you're thinking of like nightmare situations, all that stuff, it pretty much usually comes from like two things. Like this is the only thing I've ever encountered is it's either there's ego or there's a miscommunication, right? There's no other problems that I've really hit there. And you know, like I mean, Chris touched on the whole communication thing, and communication is also like a two-way street. And so I think that, I mean, look, most people that have an ego they may not realize that they have one. And there's different types of egos. The whole thing is like kind of like, it's like a big yin yang situation, because when it's like, how do you deal with these people? I'm thinking, well, look, usually I do this, but then sometimes I do this, and the line's quite blurry because it depends when and how it's happened. So
yeah,
a million variables as usual, and that's why experience is like the only antidote. But like to know which thing to do.
Yeah,
I reckon. I really do think that like going in, if you can just leave the ego at the door, you'll learn more. But if you don't, you'll probably just walk out and there'll be a miscommunication and it's going to hurt your ego. And then you'll think, oh, the producer was mean to me because he's a bad man. When really, you know, if you went in with a slightly different mindset, you come out and go, oh, I'm now a better drummer. And this has been quite, maybe it was unpleasant, like, but you know, maybe it wasn't pleasant, but who cares? Like,
yeah. And I mean, like, you have to, I understand where people are coming from with when they do start to, I mean, sometimes it rears its head as ego more than what it actually is. But I mean, for a lot of people, working on someone else's music is you're working with the most important thing for them. You know, some people care about their music more than they care about their firstborn. You know, it's like, and it's a sensitive thing, and it's often very emotional, which is why the studio turns into a fairly emotional place.
Yeah.
It's trying to, from an artist perspective, it's trying to, I guess, draw a line in your head about what's an attack or what's criticism on your art versus what's criticism on you as a person, or what's criticism on you as a performance versus what's a criticism on your art. Like sometimes saying something about your performance and maybe the drum wasn't hit the right way or the double kicks were a bit wobbly. I mean, it's not an attack. it's not an attack on saying, oh man, your song's really bad. Or even if it is saying your song's really bad, it's not saying that like it's not an attack at your artistic integrity. It's always I think for most people it's coming from a place where it's, you know, you have this really great creative vision or this really great creative idea. Let's refine that and get that exactly the way that you are hearing it, or exactly like even better version of that.
Yeah.
I think that kind of comes back to what John was saying a little bit about the communication side of things. I mean, there's plenty of poor communicating producers out there which probably don't articulate that as well as they could. But yeah, two-way street. It happens the other way as well.
Yeah.
There would be a lot of cognitive dissonance. I've been like, I was listening to this podcast the other day about cognitive dissonance, and that's a huge thing of what happens in the studio as well. Like minus the whole ego and communication, all that. Then there's like the whole thing of, you know, if this guy thinks I've just given 110%, this is the best I've ever played, he's telling me it's not good enough. Both those ideas can't exist. Someone's right and someone's wrong. And so
totally,
it's pretty natural. It sort of sets off things physically that make you feel attacked, right? And no one's attacking anyone. It's like that dissonance in your mind where you're struggling with these two ideas. Which one's the truth? Like, which one's real?
Yeah.
Like good. Like, that's a pretty rough thing to come to terms with. Or even if it's a songwriting thing, like you should change this song. And like Chris said, like some of the bands like we've had, it's like they don't have a mortgage because they're doing an album. Like this is what they're living. They're living in the album. They're living in album world. They're not buying a house. They're not starting a family, or like they're ignoring their firstborn, you know, whatever. Whatever the fuck it is. You know, these people, it's the most important thing in their life. So, you know, to experience cognitive dissonance when, you know, the most important thing in your life is at stake wouldn't be very pleasant. And that's why, like mindset is kind of important. If you're able to, you know, if you are someone who's anxious, or if you're someone who maybe you realize, maybe I do have a bit of an ego and I would get hurt easily, it's handy to maybe think, hey, look, I'm just going to go in and get some experience. It's not going to be what I think it's going to be, that's for sure. And I'll just try and learn as much as I can instead of get what I want, or what I don't want it to be how I think it should be. I'm going to let it be what it is.
Yeah.
Try not to, like, you know, if I experience any cognitive dissonance, or if I'm like feeling attacked, I'm going to just like take a step back and just relax, like try and not worry about it so much. It's hard because like after years of sitting in a studio, it's hard to imagine the other side again. But I reckon
that's a huge one. I mean, I've in the past few years, I've been in the experience where it's like I want to take a step back and I've gone and worked with somebody else as an artist and not done any of the production work. And then I've been sitting there, you know, back in like on the couch and been like started feeling that pressure and that maybe a bit of that anxiety. And that to me, I changed a few habits after I kind of came out of those experiences, being like, oh, maybe I'm pushing it a little too far occasionally here and there. Like it is easy to forget. Like very easy, you know.
Yeah.
Those wake up calls, or I mean, that's probably a little bit unfair to label it as that, but those things all contribute to like you guys doing an even more amazing job and the musician developing themselves as well. Like I think it's necessary to have constant reminders of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with so much of music, particularly producing music, is just about perspective. And the whole reason why a lot of the time, well, I mean, everyone can record music at home. It's really easy. The most valuable thing that you can have about having a producer is having perspective. But that works, you know, without the recording as well. Like in a band, you know, you have to have the right perspective to be able to see what your role is, your value.
Yeah.
It's not even in music as well, though. It's like even outside, if you're working in business or if you're working in a, you know, in a team of people in your workplace, it's like having perspective about where you are, your place, what you're doing, why you're doing it, all of that stuff is just it's starting to get very philosophical, but it helps you find your place in the world. So yeah, there's music's definitely no exception to that at all. So yeah, those. I mean, I would completely back calling it a wake up call, and I think everyone needs them. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard these days because it's like, you know, love to go for a drive and get that wake up call sometimes. Like, you know, work on a mix for 3 days straight, and then it's still not sounding right. You just need to go do a car test or whatever it is. Like, that's kind of hard at the moment. But yeah, I love a good wake up call. It's great.
No, for me, not so. It's not that great at the time when you're like, that realization of like it's like a slap in the face. But afterwards, it's all right when you sort of learn from it and adjust.
If we're talking about going for drives in cars, and I think you're talking about what you're talking about there, Nico, I still need to get an update from you on where all that's at the moment.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe that's a non-music talk for when we're done.
Yeah, we'll save it for that.
Yeah.
How's everyone going for time, by the way? Did anyone need to duck off now or?
I've got a lot on today.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. I've got nothing on. This could go for 3 months, and I probably still wouldn't run into any commitments.
I've actually got another 15.
Can I kick off with one controversial topic then, if we can utilize that 15 minutes?
I love controversial.
You probably won't like this one.
Really?
Yeah. So remember, it was probably the last chat. I don't know if it was in the Zoom call or over phone call, but you mentioned something about a band.
Hang on. Yeah. I know where you're going.
Are you ready for it?
Yeah,
Nickelback.
Yeah, that was the first argument we ever had.
Oh yeah, okay. I know what road we're going on now.
I told Nick, I go, I can't remember what we were speaking about, but I said, oh look, you know, I've had some arguments with Chris. I go, I remember the first one. It was really funny. We were working at Billy Hyde's, like music retail, selling drums and guitars or whatever. And after work, we all sort of went out, and we're all sitting there. There was a whole bunch of us, but me and Chris started talking about Nickelback, and Nickelback's song came on the radio. And Chris is like, oh, how good is this bass tone? And I'm like, how shit is this band? Like, how shit is the song? Like, and he goes, yeah, look, I'm not the biggest Nickelback fan, but like, someone's done a good job on that bass tone. And I think I remember saying something like, I can't hear the bass tone over how shit the song is. And it's really funny because a couple of friends like love Nickelback. And so I've been taken on the grand tour now, right? And I'm listening to them it was a couple of weeks ago, and I just remember thinking the same thing. I was like, fuck, this sounds good. Like, like I'm not a big Nickelback fan at all, but I just remember thinking like, yeah, fuck, it does sound pretty good.
You know what?
Songs are still shit though. A lot of those singles are garbage, but there was actually some killer tracks that I heard.
So I think the Nickelback argument about whether they're good or not is about as mentally stimulating as whether pineapple belongs on pizza or not. I think if you like pineapple on pizza, you should have pineapple on pizza.
You're right. It's actually not a conversation of whether they're good or not. They are what they are. The conversation is, do you like them and why? Or do you hate them and why? It's a preference thing, right? But we just, especially in Australia, like that's not how we talk. It's just like, tall poppy, let's rip them down. Let's not be articulate about it. Let's be like, they suck. Not, I don't like them. It's like, no, they're bad. It's their fault I don't like them. Like, they've done something wrong, you know?
The thing is, everybody I know who has and now you're included in this, Jono. Everybody that I know who has done a good search on the Nickelback deep cuts always comes back with a new appreciation for them. Because I understand that, like, I understand where, I guess, I'm going to say the cringiness of some of their thing comes from, and I feel like the radio singles are to blame for that more than what they deserve, you know.
It doesn't show you all of Nickelback. When you hear the singles, you don't really know Nickelback.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially if you're a heavy music fan, they do so many things which in parallel to like our metalcore front runners, you know, of the last 5 or 10 years. Like, just there's so many firstly, like, they produce records that, like, they produce records in the same way and the same kind of meticulousness that the metal world do. They actually have some really heavy tracks, but they do it in a way which is like with a consciousness of you know, musicality, which I think is sometimes starved in
there's
that world
real
a little bit.
Tasty stuff in there.
Yeah.
And you know, I found a few you know, after listening to all this stuff, like I found some songs that I like, and I like that they got that. There's that Pantera type tribute song with that solo.
Do you know the story about that?
Yeah, I obviously like Pantera, so I was like, oh, they like Pantera, I like Pantera. We could be buddies.
No, but no. What I'm saying is, do you know that song? Do you know, like, I know it's like sounds like Pantera.
Yeah,
do you know?
I know the story behind it. Yeah,
with the solo, and how the solo is like one of Dime's actual solos, and they wrote a song around it.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So that's it's a funny thing, but you know, like I still think that I still don't like the singles, but I've found a whole bunch of shit that I do like. And it was just funny sitting there. Like I was sitting there with a friend. This guy knows Chris as well, and I was like, "Fuck, this sounds good." And then he knows about this argument that I've had with Chris about Nickelback, and he's laughing at me. He goes, "When are you going to tell Chris?" I was like, "I'm not." I'll ring him right now and tell him this shit.
Classic Jono Peters.
Oh, look,
there you go. In a nutshell.
It's their fault I don't like them, and they've done something wrong to me.
That's the problem with the world today, isn't it? It's everyone someone else's fault.
Yep.
I was worried. I thought that was going to be way more controversial, Nick. I thought you were going to pull up something like way more red hot than that. I'm glad we talked about that. That's good.
Oh, nah, like
I mean, it's getting a bit toasty in here.
No, that's. I'm glad that's been addressed, and I'm glad you can now start enjoying some Nickelback deep cuts there, Jono.
You know what I did think though, like, because I was actually like, yeah, like I don't even care now. I'm like, I found some songs I really like, but the deeper thing there for me was understanding the difference between like hearing a mix and hearing a song and being able to separate them, because now I struggle with that. Like I struggle with just listening to the song, because I'm getting all this information now instead of just listening to what the drums are doing, what the guitar or the vocal line that I might like. I'm struggling to hear that now, which is really, really interesting. It's like, and that's why it's like listening to music now is often I'll drive around and not listen to anything. I just put silence, and I just thought, how depressing is this? Like I never thought I'd see the day where I don't want the radio on. I don't want to listen to any music. I'm driving around in silence. I used to think crazy people drove around in silence. You'd have to be a serial killer to not hear music. You know, there's something wrong with you. But
I think though that there's a trend there which is at play, because I've thought about this a lot as well. And I think that like the complexity of music production these days, so not the complexity, it's like the influence of music production on songwriting has changed the way that people are actually constructing and assembling their songs. If I think about like,
For sure.
any of my favorite music that might have come out in the last 5 years or so, it's I can probably bet that there's a portion of that music that was created in the studio which has come from demo audio, demo recordings, and what I mean by that is like the production stuff of the extra synth layer, the extra, production effects, the sounds and things like that, which are now part of songwriting more than they ever were. Whereas if I go back and have like a, like, what's the example? Like I was listening to some Slipknot the other day, something which I actually haven't done much in the last 5 or 10 years, really. But I went back and listened to the old albums, and I was like, there's a 9-piece band here, and there's 9 things happening. That's it. The I guess the ethos or the approach to making music then was like, you need a beer keg being smashed by a baseball bat. Well, we got to get a member to do that, and they, that's it. And then when you go into the studio, you listen to their guitars, and they have, Jim Root on the left side and Mick Thompson on the right side, and you can hear 2 guitar parts played with 2 different guitar tones. That's not a thing of the way a lot of people make music these days. So the production almost becomes like a part of the arrangement, or like its own influence on the song. I think it's very hard to listen to just the song these days. And if you did, you were probably listening to, a 70s inspired type band, which would be, band in the room type arrangement, guitar, bass, drums, vocals, minimal, overdubs, layers. So I don't blame you with that at all. Like I think that's a,
it's in some cases it's as if there's more going on with the production than the actual song. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not.
I think when it's done well, it's giving music something a little bit more interesting, something for me to like, grab onto a little more. I mean, I'm not a purist when it comes to, was it performed or not. Like I'm not. If it makes the song better, it's better, right? But there's only so many chord progressions that we can come up with. There's only so many, lead guitar melodies and vocal melodies that we're gonna really be able to come up with. I like having more stuff in there to stimulate my mind when I'm listening to music. I back it.
Well, I think we kind of have to back it, because otherwise we're saying our job doesn't matter. So I back it too. I'll produce the fuck out of you. We'll be giving on every 1, 2, 3, and 4, and
I love it.
But it's it keeps it fun a lot of the time. It also keeps it fun in the studio. Like it's fun to do that stuff. The artists usually enjoy it, and it's a non-invasive way of improving the listener's experience, because it's not like you have to go to this precious songwriter and go, let me take that chord and move it over here. He's gonna freak out. But if you go, hey, why don't you add this in, and it's not changing anything you've done and it's complementing it, he's like, oh yeah, you're complimenting me, I like that, let's put it in, it was my idea. Okay, it's in, better. It's like it's non-invasive.
Now I got a
Sorry. Nick.
Now I got to question how many times you've done that when we've been working on the summit stuff, Jono.
Well, Nick, it was all your idea.
I thought so. That's right.
No, we did every decision was made together. Every project is pretty different. So, we we went ham on that production stuff, but we also ran a bit of we did things in a bit of a weird way because we got the best of both worlds there. There's like, I mean, it's chock-a-block full of that kind of the production stuff. But the songwriting is probably where we spent the most time fussing over all these tiny little details. And it's funny because sometimes you need to, and sometimes that's the best way to do it. And for the style you're doing, I don't think there's any way around that. I don't think you can sit and make something that's really technical, progressive, and different without spending the time. If you don't spend the time, you're always going to resort back to your usual tricks and your influences and the stuff you normally do. Yeah. If I was to rush something, I could make something sound technical quickly and pull something together. But if I sat and then thought about it, which is really the nature of that technical music, if you sit and you think and you conceptualize and you do all these other things, you create something that's a little more different to what you would usually do. Something
that's such a good point.
Has hidden gems. You know?
So that's such a good point. You just end up like reaching if you aren't spending the time and the detail, you end up just reaching into your. Everyone's kind of got their bag of tricks. You just, they're always at arm's reach and you can grab them really quickly. But if you want to kind of push that further and develop the idea a little more, it requires time.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But also, Nick, like you kept wanting to do so much gent stuff. So, if you're really to blame with a lot of stuff that ended up on there, you got to take responsibility.
No, I do remember more commonly times where you do something really, especially on drums. Like I've said before, there's this moment of silence where you're just you're writing something on the drums, and my attention might divert somewhere else temporarily, and then I come back and you've written this fill, and I'm like, how the hell am I even going to play that?
Well, that's the beauty of it. Is the reason I do it is because I don't have to play that ever. So why would I not? It's like, if it sounds great and it like suits the song and it makes the song better, it's like, okay, have a fill that works, or we could have you go through 50 and find the weirdest, best, most like something that fits, but you never see it coming. We could have that, and that suits the style of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because I never have to play it, it's a much easier decision for me to go, oh yeah, put it in there. Like, put it in there. You know what, Chris? Like when we were starting out, I used to really think I never thought about how it would be recreated live. So I'd be like, oh, don't worry if you can't play this bit. Let's put it in there. This feels great, right? And then, I remember seeing some of the bands we worked with live and thinking, wow, they really can't play this shit. and then now I've got this sort of approach where it's like, it's taking into account everything. Now, you haven't been graced with that, Nick. Yours is all hard to play, but like for a modern metalcore band, it's like, can he play this? Are they going to nail this? Are they going to make this sound good live? And now there's a mindset of that as well. Like, you got to translate the song into a studio recording, and then they've got to translate it back out live. Can it be done?
Here's a question. Do you think that matters as much now than how it might? Do you think it holds as much weight now than it would have in 1995?
No way.
Because the way that people consume music these days is less conscious of the live music aspect as well. I mean, live music isn't as big of a thing, unfortunately, but I mean, don't get me wrong, I love seeing a band pull it off live and be an awesome live band, but if a band's not great live, it doesn't make me not like their songs.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't like their songs any less because they're not maybe the greatest live band. Do you think that that matters in 2021 as much as it does in 1995?
I don't think it matters as much. No.
Mm.
It is a like I like doing it because I feel like then I'm providing more value, and it's kind of like if you can still have the same amount of spice in your production and you can have it so they are able to sound a little better live. I just realized when I'm making some of these decisions back here in the studio in this nice little room, it's like I'm literally having a direct impact on how tight they will sound live due to how difficult I'm making it, how challenging it is, how taxing it is. And I realize, is there a way to not make it as taxing, but still have all this mad stuff that it needs, So to me, it's more like you're always changing how you do things. From now, I'm trying to do this less is more thing and focus on improving a number of areas rather than just my one. So it's like focusing on a few different things. I'm just finding it fun for now. Talk to me in a year and I'll be like, yeah, fuck that. I'm back on everything is sweep picking and there's blast beats and
Nice.
Nice. Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. But for now, that's something I've just found myself doing, thinking about, like not just the moment in the studio, but the moments that will come from this. So like, it starts in the studio, like that's where you record, and then you go and you tour and people hear it. And there's many more experiences that come from the one experience we've got with the artist. So it's kind of like, okay, how do I make those better? Well, I know how to do it in the production sense. Is there a way to have more of an impact, But like you said, I 100% think without a doubt, it's not as important. That whole live thing is not as important as it was at all.
What about, for example, like, this isn't my view, but it's just another thing to consider, is what if, for example, the singer can't sing it live, can't stay in key?
I think it's a little different with singers. I mean, I would be more I know I am when I'm working with a singer, which might be kind of reaching for things slightly outside their ability. As I said before, I'm not a purist with that stuff. Like I'm not really too worried whether it's super doable or not. But I mean, you got to think about the identity of an artist and the identity of like a band more than anything. A lot of that weight falls on a singer, and you do want them to be able to work outside the studio as efficiently as possible and be able to actually do it. The other thing too is, like, I'm sure Jono will agree with me on this, but I think that vocals is one of the hardest things to fake. Like, sure, we can do things to make it kind of work, but making it sound good and making it not suck if it already does suck is kind of outside the tool set anyway. So I feel like that's a limiting factor where you would probably like stop at the point of things not sounding particularly great if they had to be, altered and edited and docked it up too much. Drums, guitars, everything else, that's another story. We can throw a drum kit down a staircase and record it and probably turn it into something.
You know what else with the live thing? Like you are never going to hear the same level of detail live as you would on a recording. So there's
especially when it comes to guitars, especially with guitars.
You just hear this like, big ball of gain over there, and it's for the modern metal stuff. It's like, okay, well, there's a guitar. Can't really hear what it's doing. You might notice if they hit a wrong note, but I mean, I've seen a lot of people not notice wrong notes. and
Yeah.
many of them. So, you know, yeah, like there's a bit of room to hide live as well. There always has been, always will be. There's definitely no hiding in the studio though.
Yeah.
So yeah, but you know what else? Like that, the whole human element. You know, you're talking about vocals, like it's hard to fake it, and like we sort of touched on it with the drum thing. It's like I always word it like, you know, it doesn't sound played. That's the thing about programmed drums, and it's like, what does that mean? I know what it means. I can't articulate it that well, but you know, like it's all that stuff Chris was saying about like those slight variations, and there's millions of them, but that's and all those variables, like that's what makes it sound, in my mind, it sounds played, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I was just thinking like that's it is really tricky with vocals, and it's funny because you set up for drums and it's like it takes a couple of hours, like it takes a long time, and there's a lot of messing around and perfecting things and making sure everything is just right. And then with the singer, it's like there's one microphone and you're ready to go. Like it's like do a few things and it's you're up and running in no time. But yeah, it is funny because you don't have as much freedom to manipulate it afterwards. You can put it in tune and you can move stuff, and then that's it. And if it doesn't sound right at the source, it's like it's just not going to sound right.
I always say to people, is like, there's only so many ways I can put a microphone in front of your face.
Yeah.
You know, realistically, like it's got to be that, like the sound you want has got to be there in some shape or form. You know, I think the misconception with editing and making stuff in the studio is that you could create something that's not there. But it's not the case. I mean, editing and even mixing and processing, whatever it is, you can take stuff away that you don't like, but you can't add stuff that's not there to begin with.
Yeah.
You know, particularly with vocals, because yeah, drums and stuff like that, you can put in samples and add things and stuff that way. But like, yeah, with vocals, like if the sound's not there, it's not there, unfortunately. And until we get a MIDI vocal plugin, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
You reckon we'll live long enough to see plugins where you've got voice simulators? So kind of like the amp sims, but it's for vocals. So you can have the Hetfield plugin, and it has started.
Oh no.
It's a bit of a joke at the moment, a bit of a gimmick, but it's not that far away. It's like in the stage where if you're writing a song and you wanted to put a vocal melody down and you didn't want to use a piano anymore, like you just wanted to have a vocal sound.
Yeah.
I don't know if lyrics are part of that yet, but yeah, I've seen it happen.
That's what I was going to say. Imagine the Hetfield one. It changes your lyrics. There's a bug. It keeps going, yeah.
You just take the audio recording, the vocal recording from any live performance, and you can have that from Metallica.
That's it. Just take the banter.
That would be a lot of fun if there was a few of those. I can imagine exactly what I'd be doing. I'd be using like the Post Malone one in the Metal Project just to see how funny it sounded. I was like, pull up Tupac, 50 Cent. Let's put that on. And
well, they're getting like AI and stuff like that to do. Like you see the videos of like the TikTok videos and stuff where they've got like that narrator in there doing stuff. I think that's what's happening. I haven't really used TikTok before, but from what I can tell, it's like a narrator. You can input what you want it to say and it will come. And it's hard to it's hard to be able to hear. It's hard to hear what the artificial voice is and what's not. Like, you know, and even thinking about things like Siri and stuff like that on your phone, like they have to be sampled at some point, where it has to be like there's only like so much time that they can devote to like recording every possible text combination in the world. It can't be a pre-sequenced thing, so the technology has to be there. If we can just add pitch to it convincingly, I don't think it's that far off.
Yeah, for sure.
It'll be like everything though. It'll go through like demo phases where people are using it in demos, and it's kind of a bit of a gimmick and a bit of a joke, and it's just for ideas. And then all of a sudden, it'll pop up and it'll be like, "Oh shit, we've used this," you know.
But the most important thing with that is like, how's that going to affect prank calls?
Oh god.
I reckon it would take the enjoyment out of it.
Hey, have you been like called by a scammer yet about like, you know, you need to pay, you know, $7 million to the ATO or something like that? I got fooled by it the first time. I was like, wait, who is this?
It sounds like a real guy.
Yeah, it was a bot. Actually, they will be the ones to develop it first. As musicians, we'll get it last.
Actually, I didn't get the tax one. I got the police one, where it's like you need to contact the police urgently about. So, and then I'm listening. I was scared at first. I was like, what have I done? Like, and then halfway through, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I've fallen for this shit.
Yeah, it's getting harder and harder to not fall for it. Like my I'm getting text messages at the moment. I get about 15 a day or so. Yeah. And it's like, you're getting a delivery today. You just got a new voicemail. And when they don't have spelling errors in them, the first couple ones I got, I was like, oh, I might click that link. And I was like, no, don't.
Yeah.
Click the link in.
We're it sounds like we're on the road to being like, you know, when dial-up came out, like internet comes out, and you know, your nan is getting that email from the Nigerian prince, taking it seriously. I think, you know, I think that's where we're headed. We're going to be the next. We're going to be clicking these links.
I feel like a boomer.
Yeah.
I was like, I used to be so ahead of this stuff, and now I'm getting fooled by it. It's like,
now I empathize with my parents.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I shouldn't have laughed at you that much for falling for that email, because now it's getting pretty convincing.
I might go buy a copy of Norton Antivirus tomorrow.
Yeah.
See what that does for me. Fall into that one.